Hello.
Hi, Saoirse, how are you?
Good.
So we're all set for
Um,
this evening.
yes, we are indeed.
Good.
So
Yeah.
I guess we'll just get straight into it.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for joining. I know it's 9 p.m. on this evening.
Yeah.
So thank you all for being here.
Going to say hello, Saoirse. Sorry.
Of course,
I
sorry.
know you're fine. And I said we jump straight in, but just thanks. And as Saoirse said, it's late in the evening, so thank you so much. And anybody's not here, we have a recording. So welcome to everybody who watches the recording later on. So yeah, we're going to jump straight in, Saoirse. Thanks a million. The first thing that came in for this live, you go ahead.
Yeah. So we have a teacher who's been in the education sector for over 15 years, which is obviously a long time, but she's seen, especially in the last couple of years, that there's been quite a rise in levels of anxiety with students. She says she's spoken to colleagues as well who've noticed the same thing, something similar. Um, what would be your thoughts here? Do you think there has been an increase in childhood anxiety, or is it possible that we're just more aware of it?
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a great question, and it comes up so much. And I think she's on the money in terms of saying there has been an exponential growth in the level of anxiety we're seeing in children and young people and adults, actually.
Yes, yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I think the anxiety has been on the rise. So I think at the time I worked in the HSE,
Mm,
which is, I think I finished about 8 years ago now. So, you're talking 10, 12 years ago, it was always a hot topic in the psychology department, anxiety. So there were always groups and parent groups and all of that. So it's been there. And I think it's more of a kind of the last decade and a half, it's been rising. But without a doubt, the impact of the COVID restrictions and what's happened in the last few
yeah.
years has contributed hugely to more and more people in general, but children in particular, who
Mm,
were one of the most vulnerable groups throughout and had, I suppose, the restrictions had the most significant impact, certainly on certain groups,
schools.
like young
Yeah.
children who were trying to develop their social skills and didn't have outlets for that, and young people going through transition periods where they didn't have their peer support because they didn't have access. So she's definitely right, and that's something that with our Destiny Mentor Network, where we've hundreds of mentors, it comes up all of the time, and it is anxiety is one of the hot button topics.
Yeah.
Um, so a couple of things I'd say. The first thing is just even taking the exponential rise in the last couple of years is that we need to sort of take a step back and look at what we have all, and in particular young people, have been through in terms of the level of uncertainty, unpredictability, and fear that was broadcast on a
Yeah, definitely.
multiple daily basis
Mm,
for adults, but children as well, who were exposed to media in different mediums, the radio being on, TV being on. It was a constant influx. So that changes the neurology of the brain. We're getting messages of danger and fear and all of that. What happens is we move into what's called the survival loop, and I talk about that a lot.
yeah.
And in the survival loop, our whole nervous system is in the place of I'm not safe,
Mm,
and it's driven and fueled by fear. And the interesting thing is, as calm as we think that we're being, and as unaffected as we try and show, even though that's not how we're feeling, we
mm,
can't actually mask what's going on, because so much of our communication is through our body, through our tone of voice, and they're not easy to change or manipulate. They just are what they are. So you can
yeah.
try and be a different way. So that's the first thing. So in terms of how do we support young people who are coming in with that level of anxiety, the first thing that the brain needs more than anything is a sense of safety. It
Okay.
needs to be able to transition out of that survival mode. So it's been bombarded for a long period of time, constant messages and constant feedback that things aren't safe. So how we create that safety is, the first thing is we need to put in what was lost, which was a sense of predictability.
Routine.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and we kind of have to nearly overextend on that for some young people. Like,
Right.
really need to know, like, for the moment until their nervous system calms down, what's happening. And that's why some children will have a lot of questions. And if there's any little change or things aren't happening the way they expected, it can really trigger their nervous system. And that's why you can see sort of explosive or the emotional meltdowns. So we
Okay.
need to create as much predictability as we can. Things have to change. That's life. So it's just preparing them for that as well. But where you've got somebody really in that survival mode, where that kind of trigger is so sensitive, it's
Mm,
about trying to be as predictable as we can be. The other thing that's really, really important is really, really clear boundaries around what's okay and what's not okay. And that's another thing that helps us and children feel safe. So if we're in any situation, work situation, personal situation, where we're not clear where we stand and the boundaries aren't really clear, we feel unsettled.
Yeah,
We
definitely.
don't feel confident, and it just unnerves us and we can't be ourselves. So it's the same for children as well. And it's at home where things are not, in a school that there's typically certain rules in school, you can't do this, you can do this. And in lots of schools, they have really good kind of ways of communicating. So my son's school have a colour system, which is lovely because kids know clearly green and red and all of that, and simple. But in other schools, they have other ways of doing it. But generally, it's like what you can do and can't do is generally fairly clear. And that's why some children who are not coping in other environments cope well in structured environments. Really
okay, yeah.
But at home, it might mean that you have to try and kind of set some of those boundaries in place. So if you feel children are, one big indicator that children don't feel safe and that they need more support is that it feels like they're trying to press your buttons, or it feels like they need to have control a lot of the time. So when you have that sense your child has the remote and is pressing the buttons, that's not an indicator they're being manipulative or they're looking for attention. That's a flag for they're not feeling safe right now.
Okay.
So part of that is you understanding, what do I need to do here that helps them feel safer? One of the things sometimes is where parents aren't pulling together. And there's one with really tight boundaries sometimes, or some sense of boundaries, and another who's very much, sure, what does it matter? Isn't it okay? And that tension is really difficult. So it's like the child is saying, well, if you don't know where you're at here,
how am I supposed to? Yeah.
I'm going to do. And I'm going to have to first figure out how you work and how you work. And then when I figure you out, then I know where I'm at. Right. It's all about safety. It's all about safety. The other thing in terms of it, and I touched on it, reducing that anxiety, is we have to be so in tune and mindful of where we are emotionally, particularly. Because, as I said, you can try and present as being calm and, try and pretend your tone of voice is even and all of that. But where there's a volcano bubbling in your tummy as well, you're on the edge, even if you can hold it most of the time.
Yeah.
So I this phrase came to mind this week. I probably heard it somewhere. I'm not going to claim it, but it's like, I know it's like, be the change you want to see was Martin Luther King, but it's like, be the calm you want to see.
Okay, yeah.
You have a duty as a parent or as a teacher to, I call it, calibrate. If you're having a stressful time, if you're feeling your emotions are rising, you have a duty to do something to regulate them, because we cannot expect children and young people to regulate their emotions if we are not skilled at doing it.
No, of course not.
So it's something I've committed to in the last few months in particular. So I wake quite early. I'd wake very early. And I usually have a couple of hours before the children wake up for school. And the first hour is processing and any stuff I need to deal with. And the second hour, I try and use my tools to calibrate and get myself into a space to prepare myself for the day. So even if I woke up and I'm feeling a bit stressed or there's a lot going on, I commit myself to taking that time. The mornings I don't wake up as early, I see the difference in myself in the day. So I try and take 20 minutes in the day to go calibrate. But we actually have to perform a discipline, especially at times of stress, of actually calibrating and doing things that help. I'm always talking about belly breathing because it's just critical.
Absolutely.
It's just so important. So that's a nice one because it's proactive and reactive. So I would check in several times a day and do a belly breath, because often I find my breathing has rose up, so I need to bring it down. If the kids are in the living room and I'm in the kitchen and I'm hearing the ante going up, I will pause, take that breath before I see, do I need to respond? Can I just wait? So it can be kind of a reactive in the moment. So that's really, really useful. I can't say enough about that. The second one then is some kind of a mindfulness practice, if that's helpful. For some people, they like it. I love a short, simple senses exercise. We have one on an MP3 if anybody wants it. It's 3 minutes, where it takes you through your senses, and it just helps to really ground you in the present moment. So all those swirling thoughts you have, the things that are pulling you out and stressing you and bringing you into a place that's not helpful, bringing that in is really good. I have it on a WhatsApp on my phone. So even before you get out of your car, before you get into the house, or before you go to work, get a toilet break, sit down, 3 minutes, do it. So that's really, really proactive. A reactive way of using that is just connecting with one sense. So anytime we connect with our senses, we bring ourselves into the present. and it brings us into a more responsive mode. The reactive mode is where we're overreacting because we're not dealing with what's in front of us. It's like, oh, they're always doing this, or, you know, I've told them about this, and we're bringing all this extra energy. But actually, connect to a sense, hearing, taste, smell, whatever it is, and just take that moment. It brings us back to ourselves, and we're much more likely to respond than react.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'd say is finding something that calibrates you. So for some people, it's going for a run. For some people, it's meditation. For anybody who knows me, it's the music of Damien Rice. So if I start to feel my heart elevating, I will go upstairs, I would put on a tune, it transforms me, it gets my oxytocin going, it gets my dopamine going, and it's a life tool. So find your Damien Rice music, whatever that is for you. Sometimes it's somebody funny, it's a comedian, it's a clip, it's whatever. It's something that just shifts you out of the state that you're in and helps you to relax, and it calms your nervous system. So find whatever that is for you. So they're the main things I would say. It's knowing that anxiety is a cycle, and I may have talked about it before. We can talk about it in more detail again.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of mirror neurons.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's part of the not unspoken, non-verbal information that's picked up. And children, especially with anybody that you have a strong connection with, you pick up more from them than ever can be said. And children are picking up. They're watching you when you come in the door. They're watching your demeanor. They're picking up on your intent. They're picking up on your emotions. So there's no two ways about it. It puts a huge responsibility on us to bring our best.
Yeah. I feel like children in general, though, are super perceptive for even strangers. Like sometimes, it's often children. Yeah. They're just like, they can really get that energy and everything. So, like you said, if you're anxious yourself, how is your child supposed to be able to regulate that?
Exactly. They're going to feed off it 100%. And the reason children and animals can be so perceptive about people they don't even know is because they're present. They're very. So we meet somebody and we're like, oh, do we like their hair? What are they wearing? You know, all these thoughts can flood in. So we're missing the subtle cues about somebody. But children, and our dog we have a lovely Labrador, and she's just incredible. Has rarely, I think twice ever, has barked at somebody. And it's been so interesting. And she's picked up on something, and it never happens because she's such a friendly dog. But that's it with children as well often. And that's why I'm very much about not forcing children to give a hug, not forcing them to, to do whatever, because that's teaching boundaries as well. If for whatever reason children don't feel comfortable and don't want to do something, then at the earliest stage, you respect their boundaries. That's okay today. You don't want to do that. And not, oh, it's rude or you need to do that. It's about, it's such a good lesson to say that you don't feel comfortable right that right now. That's great.
Yeah, that's a huge thing as well, I suppose, even coming into Christmas and, the holiday season and everything. Yeah. And when you're meeting all these relatives and all these distant people, it's a big thing for kids.
And people haven't seen for a while. And for adults, you see, 6 months might be nothing in a lifetime. But for a 3 or 4 year old child, it's 6 years ago. So understanding that as well and reading the child and seeing where they're at, because that's one of the dangers. And if you love children and you want to engage with them, it can be just that sense of coming right in and wanting to make them laugh. And some children will love that, but others, it'll be too much. So again, it's using that, staying present, reading the situation. You can only really read it without the swirling thoughts. So the things like the breathing, the mindfulness, doing those things on a regular basis and calibrating yourself to be present, you just pick up a whole world of new information that's not available when your mind is too busy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I hope that's helped. I think we'll be talking about anxiety again. I'm sure we will. So if there's any specifics that people have, scenarios or specific incidents. I mean, I know I've talked about dogs before, but if there's any specifics, let us know because we can definitely delve in deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. So we have another topic actually about Christmas, so coming into the season. Someone has messages to say this is their first Christmas without their mother, as she passed away last year. Her daughter was particularly close to her and becomes very upset when thinking about having Christmas without her grandmother. So as a parent, what can she do to support her?
Yeah, and definitely, this issue from our Destiny Network, like bereavement and grief is a massive topic as well. It's nearly up there with anxiety. It's not right there. For whatever reason, it's just the case that we've heard some really tragic stories of young children losing parents and siblings and all sorts of things. I think the first thing when you're supporting a child through grief, or somebody close, and you've had that connection, and for this lady it's her mother, and depending on the relationship with her mother, and depending on how much grief she's had to process in the past, the first question is for her to check in and say, where am I with this? Because
Okay.
if she's still deep in the grieving process, then like we talked about with the mirror neurons and all of that, it's this is with love and no judgment. It's really hard to be fully available when you're in that place. And so it's being honest with yourself about where you're at. Now, sometimes where there's been a long illness, it could be a relief. There can be so many scenarios. So I don't know the exact specifics. But the first thing is, how is she feeling? If she's feeling still in the depths of that grief and find it difficult to cope, and knows that it's hard to support her daughter because maybe it's triggering her and she just can't, it's trying to look for backup then, be it her husband if there is one, be it another family member, an aunt or whatever it is, who can kind of have a little bit of space and be able to be present for that time until that parent is available. If the parent is available and has processed it, it's really about understanding that, well, my sense, and I could be wrong, is that we know that we're able to let go of something when we're able to talk freely about it. And when I say let go, I mean like it doesn't hold us back. It doesn't have hope that we feel we're stuck. So if somebody can talk freely about a topic like a death or marriage breakdown, whatever it might be, it shows that there's a certain level of processing that's gone on and there's a freedom within that. So I love that when somebody passes away, and it's a lovely Irish tradition about the wake, and a lovely part of those few days is the stories. I mean, people saying, I learned stuff about my grandfather I never knew, and he was a nat broke, and all these things that make us laugh, and all the stories that carries through the deep grief of the early days. But for me, the stories and the memories are the things that keep people alive. Absolutely. Again, it depends on your view of life and death. My view is, I go with the science in the sense that physics says energy can't be created or destroyed. So I just don't see anybody really leaving in that sense. I remember somebody talking about an analogy of if a car, the end of the life of the car, needs to go to be recycled with scrapyard, whatever, and it's taken. The driver doesn't stay in the car for when that car is being recycled. They get out. For me, it's the same. The energy is what's driving the physical body in the physical world, but the energy is not part of the vessel. So
that's a lovely way
I just think that energy is always around, whatever form, I don't know. I remember losing my grandfather, and it was different. He was in his 99th year. He was in great health up to his death, and he was ready to go, and I was an adult. But I did have a very close connection with him, and I did find it very difficult when he passed for the first while. I was very fortunate at taking a lot of video footage. He played music up until his 98th year.
Oh, wow.
His 99th year, actually. He still played. We bought him a little accordion, and he still played music and he told stories. So I have an archive of videos and things that someday I'll do something with. But he was incredible. But he had all these little snippets and phrases, and a lot of them had stuck to me in business. I usually remember them too late and try and remember them earlier. I remember one he had was "No Kiani Muksamola," which is "Don't buy a pig in a bag," which I remember loads. And the other one was "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." And in business, they have been such important phrases. And every time something happens and they come to mind, I bring him to mind. So once I started to learn and be able to watch the videos, it really helped. Back to the scenario, I've gone on a bit of a tangent, but if we can bring them to mind comfortably and have the stories and look at the pictures and look at the videos and have a living presence, because I just believe even if somebody's alive or dead and they're far away or they're here, there's a living presence and there's a connection with all of us. And memories and stories and videos all help to bring that back. We lost our dear neighbour 18 months ago, and she used to spend Christmas Day with us. So last Christmas was our first Christmas without Marliese. I see her every day because her picture's in our kitchen. And we set a place for her last year. We did it with the kids, and the fork and knife was there, and she was a presence at our Christmas table. And she will be this year. So we will always remember her. And that's not about not letting go. That's about actually being able to be present with her.
And just acknowledging. And
the children still talk about Marliese. They talk about Marlise's house. We remember her all the time. So there's two ways with grief. You can focus on what's been lost, which to some degree, we go through that because there is a loss. We're physical beings with a physical loss. But then if we can adjust our focus to the presence of what they brought, the memories that we have, what they taught us that we bring with us every single day of our lives, then that
keeps them
connection
alive.
That energy
Yeah.
is always there. So it is really just about, there's a lovely book as well. It's called, there's two books, Muddles, Puddles and Sunshine. And it's lovely for younger kids. It's like a workbook and you get to fill in little worksheets and pictures and memories and all of that. And it's a lovely record of the person that passed away. So again, if you're in a place where you can process that, if not, somebody else might do it with them. But it's a lovely book to work through and to remember, and not be afraid to remember them. I think that's really important. Not be afraid to talk about them and have them in that presence. Another lovely one is the invisible string. I've talked about school anxiety or starting school, because it's, again, if they're living or they're not. But the invisible string, again, explains how that energy connects us all. And in any given moment, we can pause, bring somebody to mind and feel the energy and feel their presence, remember what they taught us, laugh about something they did. And that's bringing it to mind. So it's really supporting her not to understand the sadness and name that, and it's totally natural, but also try and weave that in with recognizing the benefit of actually remembering that person and talking about having them as a living presence in their life.
I wonder, would it be, this would be my own question, would it be like helpful as the mother to process that and maybe do the workbook alongside the child so that
Ideally,
they can recognize those feelings in their mom and see that this is normal and this is
ideally, seriously, I've got goosebumps. Like, because you might hit on a memory, it's a wave of sadness, and there may be tears. So it's around the mum being comfortable to say, yeah, I've just got a wave of sadness right there, because that's what grief is. It's up and it's down, it's and it's troughs, it's all of that. It's not one straight line. So it's a lovely idea to think that they could be comfortable enough to say, I'm feeling sadness now, because that's a memory that I just, remember that they're not here, whatever it is. But the willingness to be sad with them, and to know that sad, like every feeling comes and goes. So it's like a cloud that passes, it needs to release. I love that idea that, the reason we get rain is because clouds get so heavy, they have to release, they have to, and that's what they do. And then they're able to move again. So nothing is permanent. I had a teacher mention to me that there's a child in her school who just feels sad all the time and can't explain it and can't understand it. And I think sometimes we do get stuck in an emotion, but it's helping them to recognize. There's a lovely book called Sad by, look it up. It's called Sad by, I'll have to send it on. I'm sorry, and I have it. And it's just beautiful. But it's that whole analogy of the cloud. He lost his son, and he talks about this cloud that follows him and how long it followed him for, and then it started to move away a little bit. But any analogies like that you can use to realize everything flows and comes and goes is really helpful. But the mum being able to be sad, not obviously instead being able to process it so that it's contained and it's not all the time, because that's difficult. But just to have that moment of, wow, that really hit me actually, and I feel a bit sad. And there's nothing better than a good cry.
absolutely.
A good release, get all that tension out, let it go, and and then see what comes after that.
Yeah.
Great question.
Okay, I just had to collect myself there. Okay, so we have another question then that was sent in. My son has recently started to refuse to get out of the car in the morning to go into school. We usually eventually get him in, but this can take up to an hour with a lot of coaxing from me, from the staff. In some instances, they may bring in friends to support him as well, to encourage. Is there anything that we can do?
Okay, so something that has come up in the last couple of weeks is there are definitely some children struggling hugely with the lack of structure and predictability at this time of the year in particular. These couple of weeks now leading up to Christmas, there's Christmas plays, there's carols, there's quizzes, there's lots going on, which can be really fun for some kids because they're getting out of class and all that. It can be a nightmare for other kids. Again, some kids who just had been there and done that in the last few years, felt they were settling back in. This has probably been the first September they've really maybe felt, I know where I am, and
things are back to normal. Yeah.
And this sense of unpredictability again is triggering a lot of what they thought they had kind of processed, or that had been settled. So it's interesting that recently it's been happening. So possibly it could be something completely different. It could be something at home. It could be something that's happened at soccer or football. But we know there's a sense of not feeling safe, or not wanting to control things, sitting in the car. I'm not getting out. The tendency can be, and I worked in a school where this happened, where the school with the best will in the world the teacher would come out, or the head teacher, or the person they thought that they liked the most, and they talk to them and cajole them, and then say, but bring out their best friend. And all that is doing is adding fuel to the fire. So there's a pressure cooker there, and it's just being contained. And when we're under pressure, what we need is space, not more demands. So even people trying to be helpful is not helpful. You know, we talked about that flipping the lid. It's like, I'm just containing it. If you talk to me when I'm in this space, if you try and reason with me, I'm just not there. So I block it out. So I worked with a young boy a good few years ago who was in a similar situation, and very similar actually, but it was more about what was going on in other places. But when I got to know him, and he said to me, I just want people to leave me for a few minutes. And he said, I like to just listen to the radio and have a few minutes. And I said, so what works for you is just being able to be outside the car for a couple of minutes, in the car, listen to the radio and just get yourself ready. And he said, yeah. So he didn't want, because they like that, they had friends coming out and everything, best will in the world, but it absolutely not helpful. So there was a couple of things that needed to happen, the whole what was going on outside that, but also knowing that's what he needed. And for some children, what they will need is, I mean, I know it's not the time of year, some children need to release a bit of pressure. I mean, if you had a boxing, I love them for Christmas, I'm getting one, a boxing, ball. Yeah. But if it's something like that in a safe place, or they come in, just release tension, or do a lap at school, or there might just be a quiet area that they can go into for a few minutes. So it's just trying to take the pressure off as much as possible until they're ready to get there. Mindful of the time of year, mindful of the unpredictability, which may not suit. Now, I'm not all about having to structure everything all the time, because it's just not that. But still acknowledging what's gone on in the last years. Some children still haven't resolved that. I said loads of us haven't fully resolved that. So it's working through that, and it's giving them strategies for the shorter term. If there's something that's going on, say, they probably might struggle getting back in January after the holidays, and that'll be expected. So you might go back to the strategies that you're using now. But by kind of February or up to the midterm, if it's still a major concern, then you may need to look a little bit further and see what else is going on, because there's a root cause there that these strategies are not helping. But a lot of the time, just taking the pressure off, listening to the young person, asking them what works for them is just invaluable. And just being willing to maybe, create a bit of predictability. It's like maybe do up a new timetable for them. So Christmas Carol practice is on a Wednesday afternoon, and it might change. But if they just have a sense of, okay, my daughter loved, especially play school, she was back to second year, and the first couple of days they were just getting things bedded down. But the childcare leader is fabulous, and she said, she came up to me, like, she's only 4, and she said, I'm sorry, but you missed the group time, whatever it was. But she came in with this in mind, this is what we're doing, we come back. And, she explained to her, that's what we're doing for the next couple of days, we will be doing that. And then she was okay. For some kids, they really need that. So it's just trying to find the balance. And it's hard when you have a lot of kids that you're trying to support with a lot of different needs. But if it's causing that much time and energy of an hour in the car, it's maybe worth it. It's worth a bit of time. Yeah. So we're right on the time, seriously. I said we'll see if we minutes. That's 3 scenarios. Thank you so much. We will, if there's an interest, we'll do another one in January.
Yes, definitely.
But I think happy Christmas to everyone. It's hard to believe we're saying that already.
I know.
To say it at this stage.
Yeah, we're in December, so it's fine.
So thanks so much, everybody, for being here. Seriously, thanks. You've been fabulous. And we will see everybody in the new year. Thanks so much.
See you all soon. Thanks. Bye.